Your four favorites are She Killed in Ecstasy, Ned Rifle, The Devil's Honey, and Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. So there are common themes of revenge, trauma, psychological obsession, and destructive sexual behavior. I wrote down a bunch of movies after I watched The Devil's Honey and She Killed in Ecstasy, and you saw every single one of them except for Remember My Name. And I think you'd like this one because it has a revenge-driven narrative like three of your favorites and a female protagonist, and Jeff Goldblum has a small role in it, and even though he's not in Ned Rifle, he's in Faye Grimm, which is part of the same trilogy. I also think you'd like Baze Moi. It's a revenge film like three of your favorites, it's got female rage, and like Fire Walk with Me, it immerses us in the women's trauma and depicts characters who respond to trauma in destructive ways. Speaking of female rage and trauma, I also think you might enjoy Female Perversions, A Question of Silence, Born in Flames, On Becoming a Guinea Fowl, A Different Image, Set It Off, and House of Tolerance. Deep End, like She Killed in Ecstasy, was released in the early 70s and involves a fixation or obsession. Like The Devil's Honey, that obsession is sexual and psychological. Like Fire Walk with Me, there's this feeling of loneliness and a foreboding atmosphere. And like Ned Rifle, there's an awkwardness to the character interactions, and the film follows a teenage boy on a sort of mission. The Fourth Man, like She Killed in Ecstasy and The Devil's Honey, depicts characters driven by obsession and involves the intersection between sexual desire and violence. Like Fire Walk with Me, it involves trauma and mystery. And like Ned Rifle, it feels like the protagonist is trying to decipher another character's intentions. Out of the Blue depicts the trauma of a teenage girl like Fire Walk with Me. And the protagonist has an unconventional relationship with her parents where it feels like she's kind of raising herself like Ned Rifle. And there's an element of violence to it like She Killed in Ecstasy and The Devil's Honey. And I want to recommend The Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane for similar reasons. And clearly you're a Twin Peaks fan, and this title is actually a line that Audrey says in The Return. Angels Wear White came to mind because like Fire Walk with Me, it involves sexual trauma and shows how the system often fails victims of abuse. And like Ned Rifle, there's a character dealing with their own internal moral struggle. All of your favorites involve themes pertaining to obsession and sexuality, and most of them are from a female perspective, so I want to recommend variety. Betty Blue also involves obsession and sexuality while also telling a tragic story about a young woman like Fire Walk with Me. I think there's a chance you might like In the Realm of the Senses because it also involves obsession, sexuality, and violence. I feel like I can't explain why I picked this one without spoilers, but I think you'd like Woman in the Dunes, and I guess you'll just have to take my word for it on that one. Dogs Don't Wear Pants came to mind when I was watching The Devil's Honey because it also involves a surgeon, sexual power plays, and grief. There's a literary vibe to Ned Rifle, and some of the characters are writers, and some characters behave in unhinged and obsessive ways. So the combination of those ideas makes me want to recommend The Story of Adele H. A lot of your favorites have female anti-heroes or female characters who are either killers or intend to kill someone. So I also want to recommend Deadly Circuit, Angel Face, and Confessions. And that last one ties in with the theme of revenge in your favorites. And since two of your favorites are erotic thrillers, which is my favorite genre, I want to recommend two of my favorites that you didn't have marked as watch, Dream Lover and Femme Fatale.